Well, it's certainly quiet in here today. It is. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor's Reception Room, and we are very, very excited to host some very, very special guests from Washington, D.C., and also some very special guests from across Philadelphia and the Philadelphia region. You'll hear from her in a second, but please give a very warm Philadelphia City of Brotherly Love and Sisterly Affection welcome to the White House Senior Advisor, Chair of the White House Council on Women and Girls, Senior Advisor to President Barack Obama, Valerie Jarrett. Ms. Jarrett, we could not be more excited and honored to have you here with us today. The roundtable discussion that we just had, the armchair chat that we will have, but it is a great, great pleasure and honor to have you here in the city of Philadelphia and certainly here at City Hall for these very important discussions. We're also joined by the Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Labor. And the Secretary, Tom Perez, has also been here many, many times in the past, but I think this is our first time together here in Philadelphia. Please also give a warm welcome to the Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Labor, Chris Liu. Chris? A champion for people here across the city of Philadelphia, any number of social policy issues focused on those most in need, and certainly consistent with previous service in his time as a staff member to another great, great champion for people here in the city, the late Councilman David Cohen, but in his own right and striking his own reputation here across the city of Philadelphia. Please recognize Councilman Bill Greenlee. To all the stakeholders who also participated in our roundtable discussion, I want to thank all of you, and I think we've pretty much intact made the transition from Conversation Hall to the Mayor's Reception Room. Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to Lead on Leave, Empowering Working Families Across America. This is part of a nationwide tour that Ms. Jarrett and either Chris Liu or Secretary Perez have been embarked upon. I believe from our previous conversation, we are your second stop. And given that Ms. Jarrett is from Chicago, I have no problem being second in that tour. We just wrapped up a roundtable discussion with a diverse group of stakeholders who shared their perspectives on supporting working families, why that matters, and what it means. And the truth is, it means different things to different people. Supporting working families might mean parental leave to a new mother. It might also mean earning paid time off when you have the flu for a restaurant worker. Flexible workplace policies make for happier, healthier, and more productive workers. More productivity, of course, means a stronger economy here in Philadelphia, across Pennsylvania, and the United States of America. It is, in fact, the ultimate win-win-win. Philadelphia city government cares about our working families as well. Over the past 7 years, we've worked to implement policies that strengthen our families, our workforce, and our economy. On parental leave, in January of 2014, we adopted a new policy for parental leave, one of the most progressive leave policies by a city in the United States for all exempt, non-union city employees. It provides 4 weeks of paid leave for employees who have worked for the city for at least 6 months and applies equally to birth, adoptive, or foster mothers and fathers, and includes life partners. Additionally, birth mothers can use up to 8 weeks of accrued sick time immediately following the birth of a child. And parents can use up to 5 sick days a year in the event of a sick child. On living wage, In 2005, Philadelphia City Council passed the 21st Century Minimum Wage Standard, which required city contractors to pay their workers at least 150% of the then minimum wage. And in May of 2014, we expanded and extended the reach of that legislation. First, I signed a living wage executive order, which required that city contractors provide the same fair wage that their workers receive to their first-tier subcontractors. And as of January 1st of this year, because of a law passed by City Council last year, the living wage for city contractors was raised immediately to $12 an hour, with a provision for automatic increases based on the CPI on January 1st of every year subsequent. Expressing milk. In September, I signed into law legislation that requires employers to provide reasonable accommodation for an individual's need to express or to pump breast milk while at work in a safe, sanitary, non-bathroom space. And paid sick leave. We mandated that a worker employed at a business with 10 or more employees must earn 1 hour of paid sick leave off for every 40 hours worked. That equals about 5 days of paid sick leave each year for full-time employees. Currently, we are maintaining vigilance with regard to this particular legislation and its implementation, which comes as of May 13th. The hardworking men and women of the city deserve mandatory paid sick leave time here in Philadelphia. We have, in fact, taken meaningful steps to support working families, but you know, as you've gotten to know me over the years, you know that our work is never done. There's always more to do, and we have many, many families who still need, of course, our help. Today's discussion is about how we can more broadly work on these kinds of flexible policies and others that will strengthen our entire nation's workforce, our nation's families, and our nation's economy. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Councilman Bill Greenlee. Councilman Greenlee has been a terrific fighter for paid sick leave and a tremendous advocate for supporting our working families. Please welcome him to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for joining us on this national conversation. On behalf of City Council, I welcome you all to Philadelphia, and a special thank you to Valerie Jarrett and Deputy Secretary, Labor Secretary Chris Liu for bringing this national LeadOnLeave tour to our great city. The United States is one of the only developed nations that does not have a national policy of guaranteed paid sick time, and I believe this is really an embarrassment to our great country. It is unfair that if you go to work in a suit like this, you most likely get paid sick days. But if you work in a smock, a server's uniform, or an apron, and by the way, also probably get paid less, you don't have such a luxury. Approximately 43 million American workers do not receive sick time benefits, which means they must come to work with the flu or worse, or face losing a day's pay and possibly the loss of their job. Parents are forced to choose between earning money for groceries or staying home to care for a child with the chicken pox. This is not only unfair, it is not sound economic policy. It took us over 6 years of negotiating, and I am proud to say that Philadelphia is taking the lead on leave by having passed and enacted legislation that provides our workers with a fair policy of earned sick leave. What we have done here in Philadelphia is a testament to the fact that government and businesses can collaborate to find a fair compromise for everyone. I am glad that Philadelphia is joining 18 other cities and 3 states in providing this reasonable benefit. I know that other cities and states are not far behind us in passing similar legislation. I look forward to our discussion about how flexible workplace policies can benefit families, businesses, and the economy as a whole. And I thank you all again for being here with us today. And with that, please welcome up front Valerie Jarrett, Deputy Labor Commissioner Liu, and Mayor Nutter. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you, Councilman, and thank you all for being here. I have the pleasure of moderating this armchair discussion. I'll be asking Mayor Nutter and Valerie Jarrett some questions, and we'll also be taking questions from all of you. So feel free to pass them, I think, up to the front, and we will circulate them as well. It's an honor for me to be here with two amazing champions for working families. Let me start first with Valerie on the Lead on Leave tour. And ask her to tell us a little bit about why this tour was important and what she hopes to accomplish.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here in Philadelphia with your Mayor Nutter, who I adore, and with your Councilman Greenlee, who has been a rock star and a champion on this issue for a very long time. And we're here at such an exciting moment, just as it's about to become effective. So what Chris was alluding to is this tour that we're doing around the country, and we're focusing primarily in cities and states that have decided to work on legislation to provide paid sick leave or paid leave to their employees. And it comes as in the context of a broader issue, which is what are we going to do to ensure that our workplaces of the 21st century reflect both the values and the needs of the 21st century worker. Last summer at the White House, we had a working family summit that the Labor Department in the White House put on together. And we invited people from around the country, workers and employers, small businesses, large businesses, experts and academics, unions and advocates, all to talk about what do we need to do given the change of the demographics that we have seen over the last several decades. So for example, now half of our workforce is comprised of women. 60% of families with children, both parents now work. 40% of working moms are either single moms or the primary breadwinner. Half of men and women have said that they've given up a new job opportunity because of work-life balance, which is encouraging to see that the men have the same challenge, I suppose, as the women have. More and more men want to take advantage of paternity leave, and not just because it's on the books of their company, but they want their company to embrace the value of both parents participating in those early moments of a child's life that are unique and don't come around again. We're also seeing that as you talk to this broad range of stakeholders, the common themes emerge. Equal pay for equal work for women. Women still only earn 78 cents on the dollar, even less for women of color. Raising the minimum wage, just as you've done here in Philadelphia. We need to raise the minimum wage, and the President has called on Congress to raise it at the national level. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for Congress, and sometimes Congress is a little slow. Yes, it was a joke, but a fact. As we're waiting for Congress, the President has challenged us to go around the country and work with a coalition of the willing. And so since the President asked for Congress to raise the minimum wage last year, 17 states and 26 cities and the District of Columbia have all raised the minimum wage. So that's very important to working families. Workplace flexibility. We all have responsibilities outside of home. We all have school projects that we want to attend for our children, Halloween parades, a whole range of issues. Maybe we work a second job, and so we want to have the flexibility to accommodate both jobs. And so workplace flexibility is also a very important issue that we've heard. Childcare, another important issue. In the vast majority of our states, childcare can cost more than state tuition. And so many women don't enter the workforce or re-enter the workforce because they can't afford to, because they can't pay for their children to be taken care of in a responsible, quality way, and so that's an impediment. And then paid leave and paid sick leave. Also issues that are recognized as being very important. And as both the mayor and the council member mentioned, we simply cannot afford to have 43 million Americans, 2 amazing Americans who we just met in our roundtable, who do not have a single day of sick leave. And in fact, one of them said to me, it's been 23 years. His employer has never provided sick leave, vacation time, or health care. That's not who we are as a country. And so what we want to do is put the national spotlight on these issues that are important to working families, and to recognize that businesses that have evolved and that have put new practices in place have workers who are more productive, more loyal, less turnover, and ultimately, study after study is showing companies in the private sector are more profitable. And so we know it works, and the reason why we're here is because Philadelphia is leading on this issue, and we want the rest of the country to learn what you've already discovered, which is how important this issue is to your residents, but it's also important to the 43 million Americans around the country.
Mr. Mayor, you are now leading on this issue. Philadelphia is one of the small but growing number of jurisdictions that have taken on this issue. Why was this issue important to you, and what advice do you have for other mayors who want to take on this challenge?
Well, first, I mean, Ms. Jarrett has clearly laid out the case, but again, as folks know me, I do my best to just kind of lay it out as plainly and directly and honestly as possible. I mean, we've been working on this issue for some time. Again, Councilman Greenlee has been the champion on this issue. I certainly know the feeling of working on something for a long time and dealing with no, 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 and certainly I was a part of that kind of conversation, not on the issue, but on the timing of where we were as we were coming out of the recession. But our conversation changed as I was seeing, more and more cranes in the sky, more and more the unemployment rate coming down, businesses starting to invest and coming back, and for every reason that that Ms. Jarrett laid out. I mean, it's the same conversation and fight that the President took on with regard to the Affordable Care Act. I mean, how in the United States of America do you have 43, 48, 49 million folks without any kind of health care? And so I said, as a city, if we're starting now to actually come back, I can see the evidence that the city was coming back closer and closer toward pre-recession levels of our economy, then we have to work on these issues. And so many of the things that I laid out, if you kind of go back from a timing standpoint, you'll see they have their genesis around and about the time that things started to improve here in Philadelphia. So, any quote-unquote opposition was not about the issue. It was about the timing and can we do it and how do we balance the interests of both worker and employer. But at a point, it comes where the government has to take action to make movement, and that's what we decided to do. But the councilman provided the leadership.
Valerie, in your comments, you talked about businesses that have embraced this issue. Can you talk a little bit about some of the conversations you've had with both small and large businesses and some of the practices that they've adopted to become more worker-friendly?
Why, sure. And it's an important point to make that our research has shown, and my experience in talking to businesses, is that this is something that's important to small, medium, and large businesses. Sometimes the press will say, oh, well, a small business can't afford these niceties. Well, these aren't niceties. And what I've found in my conversations with small businesses is that they care a great deal about the culture of their companies. That's why they started their own businesses. They wanted to set the rules, the tone, the expectations, and they understand that their workers are valued and that they have to have a relationship with their workers and that their workers have families. This is no surprise to a small business. And that if you recognize that and value that, actually smaller businesses have the latitude to be even more flexible. And it's not as hard to figure out how to change shifts and make adjustments. And oftentimes their employees are willing to step in and help each other out. If somebody calls in sick, somebody else is willing to come in because they feel much more like a family and the culture is much stronger. But large businesses as well are innovating new practices. Just recently, a few weeks ago, Microsoft made a new announcement. They've always had great benefits for their employees, paid leave, paid sick leave, vacation time, et cetera, ways of continuing their education. But they realized that they had the potential to touch far many more workers, and so now they're requiring their suppliers to also provide paid leave, up to 15 days to all of their employees. Well, that reach just magnifies greatly what they're able to do. And since Microsoft made this announcement, I've had many large employers say to me, what is Microsoft up to? And then they're trying to investigate it and why they think it's positive. And when you look at Microsoft's statements, they said they're doing this because they think it's good for business. And that they're willing in the short term to pay a little bit more for those goods and services that they procure, knowing that those benefits are going to be passed on to the workers, because ultimately they think that their suppliers will be more profitable, more productive, and their employees more efficient. And so we're seeing a wide range of practices. We had a roundtable after our summit last year with only small businesses, and they had amazing new ideas. One employer, I'll never forget, small business, she gives every employee $3,000 a year that has to be used on vacation. Can't be used to pay your rent or student loans, or it has to be used on vacation, because she said because she's a small business and because her employees are so loyal, she has to force them to take vacation. And by giving them the $3,000, she has an ally in the family members. And so she said, even if an employee is thinking of leaving, their family members always say, oh, you can't leave the $3,000 on the table. Well, that was just an innovative idea that I hadn't heard of before, and I was telling this story to somebody last week, and they said that their grandfather had a business that did the exact same thing. And so part of, again, why we're traveling around the country is to share these best practices and put a spotlight on what's working. And then more concretely, states like California and Connecticut have had these paid leave programs, paid sick leave on the books for a while. And what their studies show is that a couple years in, most of the employees, the vast majority of employees in those states, think it was a good idea. And so even if they were initially a little hesitant about it because they thought it was going to cost them money, they realized that it's really an investment which will pay a return on that investment.
I want to remind folks that we are accepting questions from the audience. If you have a question, we have note cards, I believe. You can pass them to the end of your row. We are also taking questions, I believe, on Twitter.
Yes.
Twitter, so feel free to tweet those questions to us. Mr. Mayor, let me ask you to follow up on Valerie's points a little bit. You are not only leading the city through change, but you're an employer as well, and you've led by by giving your city employees these flexibilities as well. What has the experience been in the city? And a two-part question. As part of the task force, you also looked at the public health impacts of paid leave, and I'm wondering if you could discuss that a little bit.
Sure. First, I want to really thank Ms. Jarrett for sharing that story about the small employer and giving the $3,000 to their employees to go on vacation. I just can't wait until all the folks in the mayor's office start lining up asking me about the $3,000. That was a small employer somewhere.
In the private sector.
A large employer in the public sector. I do not have $3,000 for all of you, let me assure you. Well, we felt that, and again, this was through conversation with the councilman, that there's the employer side of this discussion, and there really is the health aspect as well as impact on worker. And so we had a very balanced task force that had small, medium, and large business owners represented. We had employee groups represented, but our co-chair, Natalie Lefkowitz, was really from the health side of this conversation. We thought that was very, very important. Again, I mean, everyone knows instinctively. I mean, you run into your coworker, they're really sick. The first thing you say is, A, don't come near me. B, we're not shaking hands or hugging today. And C, why don't you go home? Right? I mean, it's just kind of common sense, but there's also, I mean, there really is a health aspect to this whole discussion. And so, I mean, we're just like a regular office environment. If you're at a daycare center, if you're in a restaurant, if you're in, I mean, some of these other kinds of jobs, I mean, I don't want to share your cold, right? I want my wings, I want my fries, I want whatever I'm getting. I don't want any extra on the side, right? So, it really is a serious part of this kind of conversation. And the healthier, happier employee, I mean, again, as Ms. Jarrett said, I mean, it's just not a nice thing to do. That's a person who's going to work hard. That's a person who knows that the employer actually cares about me and what I'm doing. They're going to go that extra mile. They're going to put in that extra time. That's a more dedicated person. It's just about how we treat folks. And so, yes, we're a big public employer, and we've got 1 million rules and regulations and all of that. But I mean, whether through negotiations with our union employees or what we provide for our exempt employees who are not represented by a union. I mean, we're increasingly trying to push that envelope. And again, I think that government, in many instances, has to lead the way. And I mean, when we think about where we are today and where we've come from, I mean, someone had to have the idea that there would even be a minimum wage in this country. Someone had to make a decision somewhere along the lines that, you know, kind of 40 hours a week is about how much folks should work. I mean, there are a lot of things that have happened over time that are now built in to the American society and are commonly accepted, but I'm sure that they were different. They were radical. They were change. Now, what I can say here at home is, I mean, Philadelphians, I mean, we know, love change. They embrace change and then strangle the hell out of it. I mean, it's, you know, so it's, everything is new and different at some point in time. 5 years from now, people will wonder, what were we fighting about? We had this huge battle, Councilman remembers, about whether people should be, you know, smoking in enclosed places, right? Folks are going to lose their jobs, people are going to go out of business, all this disaster and calamity. We have more restaurants and bars in Philadelphia today than we had 7, 8 years ago. More employment, more activity. I mean, and people could not imagine going backward to those kinds of days. So, I mean, you know, it's my view, 5 to 7 years, we'll be doing this all across the United States of America and wondering what the big fight was all about, right?
Let me move to some of the questions that have been submitted by the audience members as well as on Twitter. So this one is from someone in the audience. Valerie, it's to you. Is national legislation coming? And as the mayor alluded, the fight now is in Harrisburg. What would you say to the General Assembly, which is considering whether to preempt this Philadelphia law?
Well, national legislation we're pushing for. There is a Healthy Families Act currently being considered by Congress. It's been considered for a very long time. It would provide for up to 7 days of paid leave per year for all Americans. But as I said at the outset, we can't wait for Congress because sometimes Congress is slow. And so we don't know what's going to happen. I did hear about the potential legislation here in Pennsylvania, which would undermine your ability to move forward with paid sick leave, which we think would be dreadful. And we think that your city is leading on this issue, and you should be left to have the kind of legislation that your city council supports. And we also think that Pennsylvania, the legislature, should take a hard look at why we believe this issue is so important, for all the reasons that we stated earlier. And I think that everyone in this room, the next time you go into a restaurant, you should ask the owner of the restaurant whether or not they provide paid sick leave to their employees, and think twice about whether you want to eat there. I mean, this is a real serious health issue, as the mayor alluded to. So we are very concerned with what's happening in the legislature here in Pennsylvania. We are encouraged that the governor is supportive of your legislation, and we would hope that the legislature would study other cities, other states, such as California, and Massachusetts now has it, and if you want a longer history, Connecticut, and really look at the evidence. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction, and don't try to take action without doing your due diligence. We discussed in our roundtable how this was really 6 years in the coming, and it gave an opportunity for a wide range of stakeholders to participate in the process, and now your city council has acted. And so I think, frankly, Pennsylvania should follow Philadelphia's lead, don't you?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you've made your pitch to the legislature, but I don't know if you wanted to do another pitch here publicly or call on the folks here in this room to take action.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the General Assembly should not focus on this particular issue, and my best sense is it is probably, you know, some outside force that failing in their efforts to undermine at home what we've already done, have now reached out to folks who are not affected in any way, shape, or form by this piece of legislation here in Philadelphia. Pick a county, any one of the 66, they're basically not affected by what we have done here. So more than likely, this is outside forces trying to weigh in, fearful that, again, something that happens in Philadelphia that is good may somehow spread to other parts of the Commonwealth. I think the General Assembly, with every possible respect, should really work on something that does affect all Pennsylvanians, which is the underfunding of education here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How about working on that? And, you know, I mean, because, you know, otherwise, I mean, well, anyway, they should stay focused on funding education. Let us worry about paid sick leave here. The General Assembly should be focused on raising the minimum wage across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and which would hopefully provide some inspiration again to the Congress that ultimately there would be a federal raising of the minimum wage in the United States of America. I find it fascinating that you know, a number of business people I don't know what their politics are, but a number of business people are talking about the need for raising the minimum wage in the country. S&P last summer, I mean, a wildly liberal organization, produced a report talking about income inequality. Standard & Poor's, one of the leading bond rating agencies in the world, issued a report saying that the United States of America's economy is being damaged by the fact that people are making too little in many professions across the United States of America. That is a very different position than what we're seeing some other commentators talking about. Income inequality is a serious issue in the United States. One of the ways to lift people out of poverty is to raise their wages nationally. And that's where legislative bodies, the states, and the Congress should be focusing their efforts, not messing around with us, trying to do things here locally that they can't seem to get their act together at the state or federal level.
This is a question that's been submitted by the audience, and I'll ask to Valerie. The question is, child care and elder care are both vital services for working families, yet workers in these fields are often underpaid and unprotected. What's your vision for raising the profile of this issue, child care, elder care, and lifting up the not only importance, but also the challenges faced by these workers?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I know that this isn't like the protocol, but I'm actually going to turn it back on you, Chris, because the Department of Labor has really led on this issue. I'm giving him his props here. They have really led on this issue to try to protect those workers, and they are often underpaid and not receiving the kind of compensation that they should. And before I turn it to Chris, to give him a second to collect his thoughts, since he didn't expect me to do this, we should not, in a country as wealthy as ours, live or raise our children in poverty. Full stop.
The Department of Labor has, I think, really one of the most wonderful missions. We train people for the jobs of the 21st century, and then we protect them when they get those jobs. We protect their wages, and we protect them in the workplace. The issues, the fields that this questioner has asked about, child care and elder care, are two of the most important areas, yet they're the areas that often have the fewest amount of protections. The Department of Labor recently came out of a rule which comes out of work that the president has done when he ran for president initially, where he followed around a home care worker and saw the challenges of that home care worker. And the rule would essentially provide that the home care workers were paid the wages they deserve. That rule has been challenged in court, and it's being held up at the moment. We're going to fight that one like heck to ensure that gets through, because it's not only about ensuring those workers get the wages they deserve, but it's ensuring that the people that they care for get the type of care. In addition to that, one of the things we're trying to do is ensure that those workers have a career pathway to other jobs. The work that these folks do is often entry-level work. They're long hours. It's a very large group of immigrant workers, vulnerable workers. So it's ensuring that they have access to their rights, but also ensuring that they can train for other higher-paying jobs in the healthcare professions. But it will not surprise any of you, this is a largely a women's-dominated field. And it's, again, one of the issues that contributes to pay inequity in this country. Let me go back to a question from the audience, and I'll ask this one to the mayor. It's really more of a statement. It's from Twitter. I'm a Philadelphia doctor, and I've seen fathers miss their kids' birth because they were afraid to miss work and lose their jobs. And Mr. Mayor, this reminds me of something you said in the roundtable about what this says about our values as a country We've talked about this as good for the sick leave, as good for workers, good for patrons of those businesses, good for businesses. But what about the values issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's just disgrace. Councilman Greenlee, when he was up, he talked about how, some of us maybe in, suits or other, uniforms that we might wear have a variety of things and that others don't. I mean, I remember so clearly, and I was a member of City Council, so, significant amount of freedom and flexibility. I was in a meeting on the 3rd floor of this building and got a call that I had to immediately come to the hospital. Lisa had stayed overnight, was having some challenges, but that I had to immediately rush to the hospital for an emergency delivery. So I could be there. I was in that hospital room. I saw everything that the doctors did. I will never forget that particular day. And literally 20 years later, many of you have seen, Olivia's, in college. It's not like you can, do it over. It's not like, well, I can't leave today, but could we do this tomorrow? I mean, there's possibly nothing, maybe other than getting married, I mean, nothing more personal, than that experience. And so it's those things, but it's going to ball games, it's going to the recitals, sometimes, kids can do, as they say, they do the wildest things, but, they also get sick at 5 o'clock in the morning, not necessarily maybe convenient to your schedule or to the pediatrician's schedule. So you're going to make that call. You're going to get the answering service, and then they're going to say, they'll be in at, 7:30 or 8:30, 9 o'clock, and you're going to sit around and you're going to wait until you can get that first appointment. And so, we have all these people running around the country talking about, family values, family values. Well, if you're going to talk about family values, then you have to value families. I mean, people have to be able to do these things. I mean, it's just, it's called parenthood. I mean, it's the stuff you do. And so, it's just heartbreaking.
Can I tell a quick story similar? Just so we all share our stories. And this is a lighter version of the same story, but it's one that I've never forgotten, and I tell it all the time. As Mayor Nutter knows, I started out my career in the public sector working for city government in Chicago. So I know the magic that can happen at the local level where the rubber meets the road and where you actually have to look at your constituents day in and day out every day. And I was in Mayor Daley's office, and you know him well. He was a little scary sometimes. He won't mind my saying that when I finish the story. And it was my first meeting, really my first meetings in there with him after he had given me a promotion. And during the meeting, I started like subtly trying to look at my watch. And my colleague, who was the corporation counsel, kept looking at her watch too. And finally, he stopped talking, and he realized we weren't paying any attention to him whatsoever, and we were totally preoccupied with our watches. And so he said to us, what's more important than what I'm talking about here? And in a moment of truth, I will never forget this, and it's now been over 20 years ago, I said to him, the Halloween parade starts in like 20 minutes. And it's 25 minutes away. And I was like, I didn't know what he was going to do. And he looked at me, and he paused, and he looked at Susan, and Susan said, my son's in the same Halloween parade. They were both in 2nd grade. And he said, well, then what are you doing here? And I am telling you, as a single mom, we were both single moms, the relief we felt in knowing that not only did he give us permission, but he was chastising us for having sat there and we were late. We go rushing down Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. We pull up in front of the school just as the door opens, and these little darlings come outside in their costumes, and our kids are like looking for our faces. And I'm telling you, my daughter's 29 today. If I hadn't been there, I would still be hearing about that Halloween parade. But the moral of the story is really the loyalty that I felt towards the mayor for making it clear that my daughter was a priority to him. And there was nothing I wouldn't do for him after that moment. And the peace of mind that comes with knowing that you can drop everything, whether it's a Halloween parade or when she stumbled and her teeth went through her lip, whatever it was, I never had to worry the way the two people who joined our roundtable have had to worry each and every day for years. I never had to worry about whether my employer supported the rest of my priorities. And that's who we should be. It's not always who we are, but it's certainly who we should be.
Mr. Mayor, that's tough to top, but as protocol, we're in your city. I want to give you the final word.
Yeah, no, well, the first thing is, again, as I always share with folks here, you know, these kinds of events don't happen just on their own, or kind of the magic, we send something out and then they all of a sudden happen. So first, to the lady who's in charge of this room and the other room, Jackie Dixon. Jackie, thank you very, very much. She takes care of business here. And the person who was really responsible for a lot of the organizing for today, and many of you know her as our city representative and director of communications and strategic partnerships, but really manages pretty much all things White House, Desiree Peterkin-Bell. Please recognize Desiree. All the folks across many departments and agencies who have helped us coordinate today's activities and policies and procedure. Policy Office, Legislative Affairs, folks in the Mayor's Office, Managing Director's Office, Commerce Department, and Economic Development, and certainly the Education Office. I mean, these are the folks who make things happen here in the government. I get a lot of FaceTime, get to make a lot of speeches, come to D.C. From time to time. None of that happens without all these folks here who really, you know, are focused public servants. I'm, you know, committed to them. They're committed to this city, and that's what really makes a city work. It's the folks who do the work, make things work, and encouragement and support, advocacy by members of City Council about things that affect people's lives. So I'm thrilled. We have, Ms. Jarrett and certainly Deputy Secretary, you know, we have an engaged community here in Philadelphia. I've never lived anywhere else, so I don't know about other places, but Philadelphians are not shy. They will let you know what's on their mind. From the moment we step out of our cars, step in this building, step out of this building, in the barbershop, supermarket, wherever they are, Philadelphians are going to let you know what's up, and you always have a sense and a pulse of the city. But part of the reason that we've had so much success in so many areas is that passion, is that focus, is that commitment in a city that, I was teasing earlier, really does, at a certain level, embrace change and at least is open to it. And then we have to find a pathway forward to make things happen. And so we have an incredible advocacy community here. Folks want to make progress. They want to be involved in the lifeblood of the city. They want families and children to do well. And we just have to keep pushing. But it's also the leadership of President Obama, again, on living wage, on paying well, on paid sick leave, on My Brother's Keeper, and what's going on in communities, violence involving young men and boys of color. I mean, all of these issues, no president in many of our lifetimes has tried to do and has accomplished so much. People talked about health care in this country through many, many presidents, and we love our various presidents, but the one who got it done was President Barack Obama. When this country was on the verge of economic collapse, possibly a second Great Recession and a depression, an $800 billion economic recovery plan pushed through the Congress in his second month in office. Not one House Republican voted for it, and only 3 from the other side of the aisle, and being somewhat partisan in the Senate. Rescue the auto industry, rescue financial services, housing. The country is actually coming back. And so we need the Congress to work with the President. In many of these issues, I don't know anyone who could say that a sick worker is a Democrat or Republican or partisan issue. Sick is sick. Needing health care is needing health care. Needing a job is needing a job. I think Democrats and Republicans probably get sick somewhere in the course of a year. Sickness knows no party. And so these are the issues that challenge our country, and there's no better city in the United States of America, save Ms. Jarrett's hometown in Chicago, but no better place than the birthplace of freedom, liberty, and democracy to make all these things happen. And Philadelphia will continue to lead the way, but we also get great leadership from our President, President Barack Obama. Thank you. So we're going to exit. Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for coming
Thank you,
today.
everybody.
Thank you.